Hello everyone, a very good morning and welcome to BYJU'S Exam Prep. Welcome to the daily Hindu News Analysis. Before we start with today's discussion, we have an important announcement. Tomorrow, that is on the 9th of December, we shall be conducting a special workshop exclusively on the BYJU'S Exam Prep app. The session will focus on helping you with the strategy to ace the Civil Services Examination in the very first attempt. The session will be conducted by Mukesh Jha sir. Do attend the session without fail, and all you have to do is register by using the link provided in the description box of this video. With this, let's get started with the analysis of today's The Hindu newspaper by looking at the topics that we are going to discuss today. I have chosen 8 important articles from the Delhi edition. We have 3 articles for a detailed discussion, largely from a mains point of view, and we have 5 smaller articles that are relevant for the prelims examination. So let's take up the discussion of these articles one by one. And if you guys are liking the initiative, do support us by pressing the like button, share your comments after the live stream ends, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel. Also subscribe to our Telegram channel because we shall have a quiz on these topics after the session ends. It will help you revise these articles again. So join the Telegram channel by using the link provided in the description box below. So let's start with the first article. We'll be taking up this important editorial from page number 12. This editorial deals with the current political and constitutional situation in the Union Territory of Jammu and Kashmir. Because recently the Lok Sabha passed 2 very important bills, the Jammu and Kashmir Reorganization Amendment Bill and the Jammu and Kashmir Reservation Amendment Bill. These 2 bills were pushed by the government of India and they have been passed by the Lok Sabha just a couple of days ago. So in this context, the editorial is evaluating the recent changes that have taken place in J&K, starting with the revocation of special status of Jammu and Kashmir under Article 370, which was done almost 5.5 years ago in 2019, around 4.5 years ago in 2019. In 2019, the Modi government carried out few dramatic changes in Jammu and Kashmir. The erstwhile state was reorganized into 2 union territories. The state of Jammu and Kashmir was broken down into the Union Territory of J&K and the Union Territory of Ladakh. This was in parallel to the constitutional changes that happened to the special status of J&K. The elected assembly and the elected government were dissolved, following which governor's rule was imposed in Jammu and Kashmir, which paved the way for the revocation of special status that was guaranteed under Article 370 and the special provisions that J&K enjoyed under Article 35A of the Indian Constitution. These dramatic changes that were carried out would change the political status of J&K, and in fact, these changes and the constitutional validity of these changes are still under question, and the Supreme Court of India is currently looking into this matter. In fact, in just a couple of days, on the 11th of December, the coming Monday, the Supreme Court is expected to pass its verdict regarding the constitutionality of these changes that were done back in 2019. So please note here that on Monday, we shall have a special explained session which will be taken up by Sarmad Mehraj sir to discuss the Supreme Court's verdict on the constitutionality of the changes that were done in Jammu and Kashmir in 2019. As soon as the verdict comes out, we shall have a special live session, and do catch the session live on our YouTube channel without fail. Now, to look at this editorial as to what the editorial is talking about, first we need to look at the changes that have been carried out by the new bills that have been passed by the Lok Sabha. A few changes have been introduced with regard to the reorganization of J&K and the reservation applicable in the J&K Legislative Assembly. The Union Territory of Jammu and Kashmir, which was created in 2019, comes with a Legislative Assembly. It is supposed to have an elected Legislative Assembly, but these slated elections have never been held. The Union Territory of J&K continues to remain under governor's rule, under the direct administration of the center, without reintroduction of the political process, the democratic electoral process in Jammu and Kashmir. The delimitation exercise that was necessary to pave the way for elections has also been carried out, which demarcates the constituencies in the new Union Territory. But the government of India has not moved to carry out elections as promised in Jammu and Kashmir. The government has even promised to restore statehood, but again, even these promises have not been realized till now. So without restoring normalcy back to J&K, few changes have been carried out to the Legislative Assembly through these new bills that have been passed by the Lok Sabha. The editorial says that these changes that have been introduced on Wednesday, they are not very significant changes. Even though they are not very significant changes, it does have an impact on the people of Jammu and Kashmir and the political status of Jammu and Kashmir. So if you look at the changes, it first increases the total number of assembly seats from 107 to 114. 7 new seats are being added to the Legislative Assembly of the Union Territory, and 9 seats are being reserved for scheduled tribes. This is being done for the first time. 9 seats out of the total 114 is being set aside for scheduled tribes, and it empowers the Lieutenant Governor to nominate certain individuals to the Legislative Assembly of the Union Territory. These are some changes introduced by the J&K Reorganization Amendment Bill. The other bill which was passed, the J&K Reservation Amendment Bill, replaces the term weak and underprivileged classes or the social castes as mentioned in the J&K Reservation Act of 2004. This term is being replaced with OBCs or other backward classes. Home Minister Amit Shah, who moved these bills, has stated that this reservation being extended to other backward classes in the Legislative Assembly of J&K will provide social justice finally to several communities that have been ignored and neglected. In a way, he was referring to Kashmiri Pandits who were displaced from J&K as a result of militancy that broke out in late 1980s. These changes have invited a lot of criticism as well from the opposition and from the media. So let us see why this topic is controversial. Let us see what the editorial says about the policy of the government towards Jammu and Kashmir. First of all, the editorial says that these bills which the government has pushed in the Lok Sabha, they have come just few days before the Supreme Court was about to pass a verdict on the constitutional validity of the changes that were done in 2019. This, according to the editorial, is not the right appropriate behavior on part of the government. It does not display the right propriety, according to the editorial. Ideally, the government should have waited for the Supreme Court's verdict regarding the constitutionality of changes that were done, and then it should have thought about bringing these changes. But the fact that the government has tried to introduce these bills, tried to make these changes to the Legislative Assembly, even before the Supreme Court's verdict, shows that the government, that is the center, is simply enforcing its own will on the people of Jammu and Kashmir. The reason why the editorial is of this opinion is because the central government has largely ignored the elected representatives from J&K in this entire process. There has been no consultation with the regional political parties and the legitimate political representatives. In fact, in the last 4.5 to 5.5 years, the central government has largely sidelined mainstream political parties and politicians from Jammu and Kashmir. This undermines democracy and the political process, and this becomes a fait accompli on the people of J&K. Meaning the center decides what it wants without consulting the people and the political representatives and enforces that on the people of Jammu and Kashmir. Even these new changes, even though they are very minor changes being done, it still represents a concern for the people of J&K because their concerns, their wishes is being completely ignored and sidelined in this entire process. By not consulting the elected representatives, by not engaging with the political parties and leaders in J&K, the center is simply enforcing its own will without establishing a consultative process. Consultation, political consultation is essential in a democracy, and this is being sidelined according to the editorial. So this undermines the political rights of the citizens of J&K, the people of J&K, and undermines democracy itself according to the editorial. Now, if you look at all the changes that have taken place, the reorganization of J&K from a state to a union territory, the revocation of special status under Article 370, the setting aside of the special privileges that were given under Article 35A, all these changes that were done, they happened without the consultation of the local people and the local political leaders and representatives. So this, according to the editorial, has already alienated the people of J&K. It has led to a sense of alienation because no state in India has been downgraded to a union territory. So this political downgrade and the general neglect of the concerns of the locals, the lack of consultation, the lack of political democratic processes being followed, has raised concerns that the center is just enforcing its own will by neglecting the local demands and concerns. Now, if you look at the other side of the argument, let's bring more balance into this argument because the editorial is largely one-sided. The government has always said that these changes were necessary in order to fully integrate J&K into the Union of India and to provide better development, progress to J&K, and even to tackle militancy. These changes were necessary according to the government. Now see, under Article 35A that existed before, only those domiciled in J&K would enjoy few special privileges that were guaranteed under Article 370 with regard to elections, with regard to owning property, with regard to enjoying privileges like reservation, etc. Only the residents, the people of J&K, were eligible for several of these benefits. This was one of the guarantees that were given to then Raja Hari Singh, who signed the instrument of accession when J&K merged with the Indian Union. That was right before the India-Pakistan War of 1947. So these promises that were made when J&K merged with India, they continued for several decades in order to protect the identity and the culture and the rights of people of Jammu and Kashmir. But now the government was doing away with these privileges by stating that these special privileges were creating a system of inequality where outsiders of J&K from other states of India, they wouldn't enjoy equal rights. So in order to bring that equality, in order to fully integrate J&K into India and to pave the way for development and progress, the government has said that these changes were necessary. But at the same time, don't forget that there are several northeastern states as well which have such similar special provisions. If you look at Article 371 and the series of articles under it, 371A, etc., there are few special provisions given to Nagaland, Manipur and other northeastern states in order to protect the cultural identity and the resources of the tribal communities in northeastern states. Of course, that can be argued as a justification to continue the special privileges under Article 370, but the government has said that these provisions were affecting the integration of J&K with India and creating an unequal system. So the government has justified that these changes were necessary to pave the way for development and progress and to drive investments and also to tackle terrorism and insurgency, which has been largely sponsored by Pakistan as part of its covert war against India. Now, while this remains one side of the argument, the other argument is that the manner in which these changes were done without any consultation, without following the established processes, has raised questions about the constitutional validity of these changes. That is why there are petitions in front of the Supreme Court challenging the constitutional validity of these changes. And even the method in which it was done. When these changes were carried out in August 2019, the government of India adopted few extreme measures while bringing about these changes. An almost emergency was imposed in J&K, an indirect emergency of sorts, because political leaders mainstream political leaders, they were all placed under detention and house arrest for months together. Mainstream politicians from major parties, including several political leaders, they were all placed under detention and house arrest, curbing their political rights and civil rights. So civil liberties were curbed. Communication was suspended for months together. J&K was deprived of basic telecommunication and internet. For several months, J&K didn't have 3G or 4G connection. It had to survive on 2G communication that was allowed only after several months. So suspension of communication affects your right to free speech and expression. The press freedom apparently was also curbed. There was a chilling effect on the right of the media to report the developments, given the authoritative nature in which the government had carried out the changes. And this has been followed by long power cuts in the recent past, with lack of investments and lack of any development or progress that was otherwise promised by the government. So these changes that have happened, these developments that have taken place, that has been under question. Critics have pointed out that this has crippled political life in J&K. It has crippled democracy. Elections have not been held to the new Legislative Assembly of the Union Territory, and there is no indication from the government that statehood will ever be restored to J&K. Although vague promises have been made here and there, nothing concrete has emerged out of these promises, and this raises questions about the way in which the center has been dealing with J&K. So that is why the editorial is pointing out that if the government is serious about developing Jammu and Kashmir, if it is serious about tackling the persistent root causes that contribute to militancy and terrorism in J&K, then it is important to restore political normalcy to J&K. The editorial is pointing out it's important to conduct the promised elections as soon as possible. It's important to restore statehood to J&K in order to protect the political identity of Jammu and Kashmir. So this is the primary argument the editorial is making, and there is some merit to it, because the suspension of elections, the downgrade of the state to a union territory indeed affects the political process and indeed affects the identity of the citizens of J&K. So right now all eyes are on Supreme Court's verdict, which will come out this Monday, and this will shed some more light on the constitutional validity of these changes that were carried out in 2019. So it's in this context that the editorial becomes important, and you need to be aware of the current developments, the political constitutional developments concerning Jammu and Kashmir. Now let's take up another important column from the same page, written by Happymon Jacob. This article is very, very important for international relations. The topic falls under India and its neighbourhood, which is one of the most important chapters in international relations. In this column, the writer says that Indian foreign policy is facing major challenges in its neighbourhood, that is in South Asia. As you all know, India is geopolitically, geographically located in the South Asia region. This is our immediate neighbourhood, where we share land boundaries, maritime boundaries with our neighbouring countries. For India, it has always been a priority to focus on the neighbourhood, because obviously whatever happens in your neighbouring countries, any positive development, any adverse development, they will immediately have a spillover effect on India. Let's say there is a political crisis in one neighbouring country. Let's say there is terrorism, extremism in one country, or an economic crisis in one country, or a disaster in a neighbouring country. These events that happen in our neighbouring countries will have a spillover effect. The effects will spill over across the borders and affect India's national interests immediately and directly. So it's very, very important to focus on our neighbourhood. And India has always given top priority to its neighbouring countries in its foreign policy. In fact, the Modi government has even launched the Neighbourhood First policy from 2014 to give utmost priority to our neighbouring countries, the ones which are located in South Asia especially. But the writer says that the neighbourhood has become the Achilles heel of Indian foreign policy, meaning the weak point of Indian foreign policy. According to the writer, our neighbourhood policy is the weak link in Indian foreign policy. See, right now, India is having aspirations to become a global leader. India wants to emerge as a new pole in a multipolar world. And we are already providing leadership to the global south countries to emerge as a leader of developing and underdeveloped countries. We also want to be seen not just as a regional power of South Asia, but beyond that. We want to be seen as a global power with dominating influence across the Indo-Pacific. So in this context, when India is aspiring to be considered as a global power, it's very important to cement our position as far as regional geopolitics of our region is concerned, that is South Asia is concerned. Without cementing your regional power status, it is very difficult to project the country as a global power for a much larger region. So the writer says that India is facing significant challenges in the neighbourhood. Despite the focus on the neighbouring countries and the priority given under neighbourhood first policy, there have been several setbacks to Indian foreign policy in our neighbouring countries. Let us see what these challenges are. Let's look at them one by one. Let's evaluate various challenges for Indian foreign policy in the region and then discuss the way forward. The writer says that in our neighbouring countries, there are many adverse developments that have happened in the last few years that have posed a direct threat to Indian national interests. For example, the recent elections in Maldives has apparently thrown up an anti-India government. We have discussed this in our previous sessions as well. The newly elected Maldivian president, Mohammad Muizzu, has openly taken a stand against India, especially against Indian military presence in Maldives. In fact, he won the elections largely based on his India Out campaign by pushing for a complete removal of Indian military presence from Maldives. Mohammad Muizzu, after coming to power, has reiterated this demand. He has conveyed this to the Indian side as well, that Indian troops stationed in Maldives, along with Indian military equipment, they have to be fully removed from Maldives. And apparently, Mohammad Muizzu belongs to a political party which has always shown pro-China inclinations. Mohammad Muizzu is a very close associate of former President Yamin Gayoom, under whom Maldives had clearly shown a pro-China tilt, and we had seen the rise of anti-India sentiments that led to the India Out campaign in Maldives. So the emergence of such governments and leaders in our neighborhood is a major concern for India, and India is still struggling on how to deal with such governments and leaders. We have another emerging concern in Bangladesh, as Bangladesh is headed towards elections in a few weeks. As of now in Bangladesh, we have a very friendly government. Current Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina and her party, Awami League, have always been pro-India. In fact, Sheikh Hasina's Awami League government has played a critical role since 2009 in helping India to tackle insurgency in Northeast India. Sheikh Hasina's government has helped India to tackle many security threats that emerged from Bangladesh, from cross-border crime, organized crime, to insurgency and terrorism. So Bangladesh has been a good friend of India. We have had a great partnership with Sheikh Hasina's government, but predictions are indicating that Sheikh Hasina might lose the upcoming elections, or at least Awami League is facing a considerable challenge by the Bangladesh Nationalist Party headed by Khalida Zia. Khalida Zia and her party BNP, they are known for their anti-India stand. The Bangladesh Nationalist Party has always shown a pro-Pakistan inclination, and a power contest has broken out in Bangladesh between US and China as well. China has been trying to influence the upcoming elections, and we are also noticing American interference as well in the electoral process and the political events that are happening in Bangladesh. So these are major concerns for India. India's regional power status comes under question when external powers play their own games in our neighborhood, which could be detrimental to Indian interests. And for India, the drawback is that all our eggs are in one basket. Our ties with Bangladesh is entirely dependent on Sheikh Hasina retaining power and Awami League winning the elections again. If another party or another leader comes into power, we don't have much leverage with Bangladesh, because we already have a complicated relationship with the BNP and Khaleda Zia. So there is a major concern for us in Bangladesh that is emerging in the coming weeks. You already know about the crisis situation going on in other neighboring countries, from Afghanistan to Sri Lanka to Myanmar. All the neighborhood countries are affected by these multiple crisis situations. The rise of Taliban to power in Afghanistan, the ongoing crisis in Myanmar, where the military junta captured power, abolished democracy and reimposed military dictatorship, and the current rebel resistance that the military junta is facing in Myanmar has completely destabilized Myanmar. And India has largely been watching from the sidelines, even as China has made deep inroads into Myanmar and also into Afghanistan. China has more freely engaged with the Taliban to protect its own interests. China has always worked closely with Myanmar's military junta and even with some rebel groups, thereby cementing its leverage and influence in Myanmar. Look at Sri Lanka's economic crisis. Even though India has been the biggest supporter of Sri Lanka during the economic crisis, we have given almost $4 billion worth of economic assistance, still China retains a lot of strategic influence in Sri Lanka, and it keeps docking its naval vessels and spy vessels at strategic ports like Colombo, Hambantota, etc. So the presence of China in the region and its overbearing influence is something that really undermines Indian influence as a regional power in South Asia. Even though India assumes itself to be a regional power, the writer says that the neighboring countries don't look at India as a regional power. They reject India's standing as a regional power, and they are getting closer and closer to China. Look at the persistent hostility we have had with Pakistan, primarily because of Pakistan's sponsorship of terrorism and its perpetuation of the Kashmir dispute. It goes without saying that Pakistan is China's closest ally, and both have created multiple challenges for India from the northern and western sectors. So while we have such challenges with all these neighboring countries, even with Nepal, we have had challenges, as Nepal has often played India against China. Even in Nepal, there exists a strand of politicians who have always promoted anti-India sentiments and aligned more with China to promote pro-China policies. So in Nepal as well, we have had challenges. For example, the former Prime Minister of Nepal, KP Sharma Oli, was seen as a pro-China leader who deliberately exaggerated the border dispute with India, leading to a major standoff between India and Nepal. The Kalapani dispute was blown out of proportion by KP Oli's government just a few years ago. Now we have emerging concerns in Bhutan as well. Traditionally, Bhutan has been very close to India, but now China is getting closer to Bhutan. Even though they don't have official diplomatic ties, they are getting closer to resolve their boundary dispute. China is pushing Bhutan very hard to resolve its boundary dispute, which could be to the disadvantage of India. So all these developments, where the neighboring countries are rejecting Indian presence and influence and getting closer to China, poses the biggest challenge for India in the neighborhood. The writer says that Beijing's influence in South Asia has grown. In fact, the Chinese experts and analysts, they don't even look at the region as South Asia. They often refer to it as Southern Asia, just as an extension of Asia, where China is the dominant power. Of course, China is indeed the dominant power all across the Asia Pacific, and even towards our neighborhood, China is exerting that influence which is being felt by India in its own neighborhood. Essentially, India is being upstaged by China. From Pakistan to Sri Lanka to Afghanistan to Myanmar to Nepal and even Bangladesh and Bhutan, China has become a major player in all the neighboring countries. Through its Belt and Road Initiative, it has pushed massive investments and key strategic projects into the region to cement its position. It has freely engaged even with outcast regimes, be it the Taliban, be it the military leadership in Myanmar, be it the governments in Pakistan. Even if the international community has sidelined these regimes, even if India has found it difficult to engage with them, China has no such obligations. It has freely engaged with all the outcast regimes as well, which allows China to upstage India. For example, when it comes to engaging with Taliban, India is more cautious because of the global image concerning the Taliban. China has no such obligations. It has freely engaged with the Taliban and it has protected its interests in the Afghanistan-Pakistan region. Same with Myanmar. We are mindful of the Western sanctions. India is aware of the international pressure as a result of large-scale human rights abuses and violations in Myanmar. And even though we maintain an independent policy towards Myanmar, the international pressure does act upon India. But China has no such compulsions and it continues to exercise tremendous leverage in Myanmar. So China's freedom to engage with outcast regimes, accompanied with its economic strength, where it brings billions of dollars in investments, funds these mega projects, and also brings its military strength by building defense relations with our neighbors. This has become a big challenge for India. Countering this Chinese influence is becoming a serious challenge. Now, China is moving ahead to resolve the boundary disputes that it has with the neighbors. It has already built closer ties with Nepal. It is an all-weather friend for Pakistan. And now it is trying to get closer to Bhutan and it's trying to resolve the boundary dispute that I was mentioning earlier. China is looking possibly for exchanging the strategic Doklam region from Bhutan in return for giving up its claims on other disputed areas like Jakarlung and Pasamlung. Now this is something that bothers India. With regard to China-Bhutan border dispute, India has always been guiding those negotiations. But now that Bhutan conducts its own foreign policy, China has been pushing Bhutan to resolve the boundary dispute by proposing a possible exchange. And that has got India worried because India is very sensitive about the Doklam region. China wants to gain control over Doklam and for that it is willing to give up its claims over Jakarlung and Pasamlung. So if such boundary disputes are resolved, if such agreements are signed between China and Bhutan, it again undermines Indian strategic interests and influence in the region. So all these developments pose a major challenge for Indian foreign policy according to the writer. Along with this, the presence of United States and influence of the US in South Asia has diminished. See, India has not always liked or encouraged American presence in the region because many times American policy has gone against Indian interests. But at least in the last 15-20 years, American presence and influence has been a counterbalance to China. Whether India likes it or not, the American military and economic influence in the region has always worked in India's favor as US and China are locked in their own Cold War rivalry. So the American presence in a way was suited for Indian interests. Sometimes even though American policies went against Indian interests, India welcomed the American presence across the region as it would help in countering the rising Chinese influence. But in the last few years, the American presence and influence has gone down. There is a clear decline that you can see. American troops were pulled out from Afghanistan. It was a hasty retreat that US pulled out from Afghanistan. Its leverage on Pakistan has diminished. Its role across the South Asia region has gone down, and this power vacuum, unfortunately, has not been filled by India. Rather, it has been filled by China. You need to acknowledge the fact that China is a vastly superior power to India in terms of its economic strength and military strength. If India can provide just, let's say, a few $1 million in assistance, China can bring billions of dollars in assistance. China has attracted these neighboring countries of India with billions of dollars in funds by taking up key projects, by supplying weapons, by projecting its military influence. Even though India does the same, China can outcompete India in terms of its military and economic strength. And as a result, China has been successfully filling this power vacuum left behind by the United States. The smaller states, they have been more than willing to play the China card against India. The neighboring countries, from Nepal to Maldives to Sri Lanka, they've always had issues with India. This goes all the way back to 1970s, 1980s. Since then, smaller neighbors of India have alleged that India meddles in their internal matters. They've accused India of interfering in their internal issues. So there are few elements in all our neighboring countries who like to see a limited Indian presence, and they all play the China card. They deliberately promote anti-India sentiments and they seek favors from China in return. So these neighbors like Nepal and Maldives especially, Nepal and Maldives, you can see this happening in Sri Lanka and Bangladesh as well, where the political elements and the regimes, they often play India versus China for their own benefit. And as a result of China's superiority, its economic and military superiority, more often than not, India loses out and China cements its position and influence. So this is what has been happening. And that is why the writer says that India needs to focus on integrating the region, developing the region, along with building ties with all stakeholders in our neighboring countries. This is the only way forward available for India. We should focus on integrating the region. South Asia is one of the most disconnected regions in the world. Many experts point out that regional economic integration has never happened in South Asia because of all the challenges present in the region. India, despite being the regional power, projecting itself as a regional power, has not been able to achieve the integration through groupings like SAARC. In fact, the SAARC grouping is largely seen as a failure. One of the primary objectives of SAARC was to promote regional and economic integration, but that has never happened because of Pakistan's constant obstruction of Indian initiatives at the SAARC grouping. Despite India's best efforts, our initiatives at SAARC have not really taken off, and SAARC has not been able to solve the developmental problems of South Asia. It remains a very backward region with high levels of poverty and poor socio-economic development. There is a constant political economic crisis in our neighboring countries which has affected the developmental status of our neighborhood. As India is not able to address these issues, external powers like China can easily step in and exploit this to their advantage. Small states, poor countries facing political economic crisis situations, they can be easily attracted with money power. This is why China exercises more influence than India, because money speaks in geopolitics, in international relations, and China is able to bring infinite amounts of investments and assistance which cannot be matched by India. So this is where we are facing a credible challenge. We tried following the SAARC minus Pakistan policy, since Pakistan was the major problem which was affecting regional integration, because it has always derailed any positive initiative at SAARC. It has constantly created a volatile situation in South Asia by sponsoring terrorism. So after the Uri attacks in 2016, India boycotted Pakistan, and we even sidelined the SAARC grouping and adopted this policy called SAARC minus Pakistan. India believed that we could still work with other South Asian countries by ignoring Pakistan and the SAARC grouping. But this policy of India has not really given the desired results according to the writer. So going forward, the writer says that India has its task cut out. If we have to restore our primacy in the region, first we need to acknowledge the reality that China is a persistent threat for India. China has already cemented its position and influence in our neighboring countries. We need to acknowledge this reality. The fact being highlighted by the writer is that within Indian diplomacy, there is still an assumption that India is the predominant regional power. According to the writer, that is no longer the case. India might be a traditional power. India might have cultural links, soft power links with the neighboring countries, civilizational connections with the neighbors. But China is the current dominating influence with its money power and military power. So we need to acknowledge that reality, and accordingly, we need to cultivate few friendly external actors to work in the region. We need to work with external powers if required. It could be Japan, it could be Southeast Asian countries, it could be the United States, European powers, it could be Australia or even Russia. We need to engage with other friendly external powers who have an interest in South Asia to try and build a resistance against Chinese influence. And more importantly, we have to become flexible in our diplomacy. Generally, there is a tendency in Indian diplomacy to work with one set of political elements in a country and ignore the other set. In any country, there will be certain hostile elements. Just because there are anti-India sentiments and anti-India parties, you can't ignore them. The art of diplomacy lies in reducing that hate towards India. Now take Bangladesh for example. You can't ignore BNP. We have always put our eggs in one basket. We have just built our ties relying on Awami League and Sheikh Hasina, hoping they'll remain in power forever. But that is not how it works. Someday or the other, Awami League is bound to lose elections and a party like BNP or leaders like Khalida Zia are bound to rise up. We saw this happening in Nepal. We never invested in KP Oli and other parties which were pro-China and anti-India. Just because they're anti-India doesn't mean we should hate those parties as well or those leaders as well. We suffered the same fate in Sri Lanka with Rajpaksa brothers. Right? Based on the assumption that Rajpaksa brothers are just pro-China, India didn't cultivate the Rajpaksa faction enough. You see that happening in Maldives. That is why the writer is saying that we should engage with multiple stakeholders. Whether they are pro-India or anti-India shouldn't matter to us. We should engage with every major political player in neighboring countries, and even if it's an anti-India government, even if it's an anti-India leader, we need to work with them through diplomacy to reduce their anti-India sentiments. That is the art of diplomacy. That is how you protect your core national interests. So the writer is saying that we need to adopt a mix of these strategies. First, develop the region, try and promote integration in the region. Second, acknowledge the reality that China is a significant power, it has cemented its position, and work with few friendly external powers and build these alliances with them to counter the Chinese influence. And engage with all the stakeholders in the neighboring countries. Even with leaders like Mohammad Muizzu of Maldives. If required, elements in Bangladesh, elements in Sri Lanka, Nepal, even if they are anti-India, we have to work with them. We don't have a choice. Right? We need to leverage our economic strength, our cultural strength, our military strength to counter the Chinese influence. So that is what is needed, and that is the way forward according to the writer. So UPSC can most likely ask a question. Given the developments happening in our neighborhood, UPSC might ask a question on South Asia, asking you to examine the various challenges present for India in its regional diplomacy, in its neighborhood policy. Right? So that is why I feel the article is very, very important. Next, we have another important column on the text and context page of the online edition of the Hindu. On page 14, we have this important column on deepfakes and the need for regulating artificial intelligence. So let's take a quick look at this important column and then we can proceed towards the prelims section. The topic of deepfakes has been in the news since the last 3 to 4 years. But especially in the last few days, deepfakes have become a major concern following a viral clip of a Bollywood actress that gained public attention and government's attention. I'm sure many of you would have heard or seen this clip of actress Rashmika Mandanna, which was a fake manipulated video created through a AI algorithm. These fake media platforms or these fake digital media clippings, it could be a video, it could be an audio clip or even images. These doctored media formats, which are doctored through AI algorithms, they are called as deep fakes. Essentially, it's a fake media format. It's not entirely genuine. It is created by a machine learning platform, which would have learnt from various data sets. AI algorithms are self-learning algorithms. They're built on machine learning and neural networks. They pick up patterns essentially from various videos, audio files and images, and they can reconstruct or even create completely new visuals and media formats, which looks very authentic and very genuine. You can clone the voice of a popular individual. You can create an image or a video which looks very, very genuine, as if that concerned person himself or herself would have recorded that video. That is how genuine it might appear. So deepfakes have taken the internet by storm. On all social media platforms, from Twitter, that is X, to Instagram, to Facebook, everywhere, deepfakes have become widely prevalent. Now, deepfakes raise a concern because there is a lot of potential here for the deepfakes to be misused. Now, just because it can be misused doesn't mean it doesn't have any advantages. Deepfakes do have a lot of advantages as well. In fact, doctoring a video or an image has existed since the days of Photoshop, right? But today it has gotten better with AI. It has gotten more realistic. It provides hyper-realistic digital falsification, right? So there are many advantages of deepfakes, especially in the movie industry, in crime forensics, for recreating a crime scene, for building the image of the accused, right? And for animation, for special effects, VFX in movies, gaming industry. There are plenty of applications of deepfakes, which are positive applications. But at the same time, the technology, if in the wrong hands, if it is in the wrong hands, if it is put to the wrong use, with a malicious intention, then it could have dangerous consequences. Now imagine a deepfake video of an actor. It can be easily used to defame that person, damage their reputation, right? Or imagine a deepfake of a political leader, which could be used to manipulate elections or instigate violence, riots, and divisions in the society. It poses a threat to democracy itself and democratic institutions. Recently, there was another scandal that happened involving a deep fake of Ratan Tata, a video which looked very authentic, which looked as if Ratan Tata himself was delivering the message, claimed that Ratan Tata was starting a new venture and he was calling for investments from the public into this company. But it turned out to be a deep fake. It was a scandal essentially. Imagine if people believed that, since Ratan Tata has a huge reputation, is known for his integrity, right? If people believed that and invested money, they would have lost money. It was essentially a fraud, a financial fraud. Today, there are voice cloning technologies where the exact voice of your relatives, your friends can be mimicked through deepfake AI algorithms. There have been many cyber crimes that have been pulled off, online frauds that have been pulled off through such fake audio clips. So these technologies, if put to use for the wrong purpose and with the wrong intention, with a malicious intention, it can be easily used to spread fake news, to commit frauds, to instigate violence, trigger riots, to destabilize countries, to manipulate elections, and pose a threat to the very foundation of democracy. So this indeed is a serious concern, not just in India, but around the world. It has become a global concern. So given the risk associated with deep fakes, what is the legal framework we have in the country to regulate them? Do we have laws to regulate AI and the misuse of AI? Do we have any specific legal provisions to regulate deepfake technology? The answer is no. India is always behind the curve when it comes to the legal framework with fast-moving technologies. Even when computers and internet evolved, India was slower than the rest of the world in creating a legal framework. Now, even with AI and other critical emerging technologies, we are being caught behind. So we don't have any specific laws for AI and deepfakes. Is that clear? There are no specific laws in India to regulate the misuse of AI. We don't have any specific legislation or even a policy as such to deal with the concerns raised by AI, deepfakes, and the misuse of AI. However, there are some related provisions which can be applied. There are few other laws which can be applied for these cases as well, but the fact is they are not effective, they are not enough. The primary law that we can invoke here is the IT Act, the Information Technology Act. Under IT Act, there are various provisions like Section 66E, 67, 67A, and 67B that deal with various offenses involving IT communication and IT devices. If someone is publishing or transmitting images of a person in mass media without their consent, violating their privacy, they can be prosecuted under Section 66E. If someone is spreading obscene, sexually explicit images and fake visuals of an individual, they can be tried and prosecuted under various sections of the IT Act. Of course, there are few relevant provisions under Indian Penal Code and CRPC as well, which can be invoked for these cases. But however, they don't directly apply for deepfakes and AI. Recently, the government notified IT rules that regulate social media firms. Even under the IT rules that were notified in 2021, social media firms have been placed under an obligation to take down any objectionable content which is impersonating another person and harming their dignity and reputation. If they don't take down such content, even if it is posted by a third party, then social media platforms will no longer enjoy the safe harbor provisions, meaning they'll not be able to claim legal immunity. Even they will be held liable and they can be prosecuted for hosting such content that is harming the reputation and dignity of an individual. So even though there are some related provisions which can be invoked in these cases, but it is still not effective as it specifically does not address AI related crimes and deepfakes, especially the misuse of deepfakes. Now, even though there is this legal vacuum in India, the government has brought out an advisory recently. The Ministry of Electronics and IT issued an advisory on deepfakes. But advisories are not enough. In fact, government has even engaged in a dialogue with the industry, with the tech companies, with social media firms, etc. The Niti Aayog has even brought out a AI policy. But policies and guidelines are not enough to deal with such crimes and such potential misuse which could threaten the very foundation of our legal system and our democracy. Right? Now, if you look at the global context, there is a lot of progress that other countries have made. For example, in the United States, President Biden recently signed an executive order in October 2023, just a couple of months ago. President Biden signed an executive order that places several restrictions on the misuse of AI to manage the risks, the security risks, law and order risks associated with misuse of AI. The US has also brought out the Deepfake Accountability Bill. It has been introduced in the US Congress, which seeks to act against the malicious use of deepfakes. So US is already making a lot of progress in the legislative landscape to regulate AI and deepfakes. Even in the European region, the EU has already enacted the AI Act, the Artificial Intelligence Act, to regulate the development of AI technologies and especially to prevent its misuse. It places a lot of restrictions on AI companies regarding harmful AI algorithms that could threaten security and law and order. There are a lot of curbs in the European market that has been placed by European Union. The EU has also strengthened its code of practice on disinformation, which places very strict obligations on tech companies like Google, Meta, and others to flag any deepfake content on their platforms. So in the US and European markets, those governments have already made a lot of progress when it comes to regulating AI and dealing with deepfake technology. They're bringing out specific laws and legislations, whereas India is still behind the curve. I'm saying we are still behind the curve because recently the Minister of State for Electronics and Information Technology, Rajiv Chandrasekhar, who shared the deepfake clip of Rashmika Mandana, he raised concern about deepfakes in his tweet, but he said that we have enough laws in place. We have enough laws, there are adequate laws in India to deal with deepfakes and misuse of AI if they are enforced strictly. So that shows the approach of the government. The government currently feels that existing laws like IT Act, IPC, etc. are enough. But experts are pointing out this is not enough to account for the rapid advances taking place in AI technology. So it's high time we think about regulating AI in India as well. Even though some thought has gone into it, discussions have taken place, concrete action is yet to be taken. As I told you, Niti Aayog has engaged with all the industry players, Ministry of Electronics and IT, CERT-In, and many concerned organizations have debated the issue of regulating AI, but no concrete proposals exist. There is no specific policy or a bill which the government is considering as of now. So the column is urging the government of India to draw few lessons from US and European Union and bring out a regulatory framework, a legal regulatory framework to regulate AI and specifically to curb the misuse of AI and the deepfake technology. Is that clear? So this concludes my detailed discussion of all the big articles in today's newspaper. Now let's quickly head towards the prelim section and take a look at the smaller articles. On the front page, we have an article related to disaster management. It specifically deals with financing with regard to disaster management in India. See, in India, disaster management financing is dealt with under the Disaster Management Act of 2005, the DM Act. The Disaster Management Act revolutionized disaster management in India. It introduced a comprehensive, holistic approach to disaster management, and it led to the implementation of the disaster management cycle, where we have focused on pre-disaster planning and preparedness, during disaster emergency relief and response, and also on post-disaster reconstruction and recovery. So these three stages of the DM cycle have been streamlined and introduced in India as part of disaster management governance through the DM Act. Now this act not only creates several institutions for disaster management like the National Disaster Management Authority, State Disaster Management Authority, National Disaster Response Force, etc. It also sets up few dedicated funds for disaster management in India. Now under the DM Act, India has adopted the National Disaster Management Policy in 2009, and we even brought out a National Disaster Management Plan in 2016. This policy and plan of India, it is in line with the UN standards. We have adopted the Sendai framework standards of the UN when it comes to disaster management. So under the disaster management plan and under the DM Act, there are two specific funds that exist in India. One is the National Disaster Response Fund, or NDRF, with similar funds at the state level, the SDRF, the State Disaster Response Fund. Don't confuse this with a response force. The national and state disaster response forces, they are different entities. They provide immediate rescue and relief during a disaster. But the National Disaster Response Fund and the State Disaster Response Fund provides financing, disaster financing for the immediate response operations during a disaster. There is another fund called the National Disaster Mitigation Fund. These are the two funds provided under the DM Act. All right. Now, the reason why the topic of disaster financing is in news is because of Cyclone Michong that caused widespread devastation to the coastline of Tamil Nadu and Andhra Pradesh. Especially Chennai has witnessed a lot of urban flooding, right? And across the east coast of India, there is significant damage caused by Cyclone Michong. So to deal with the after effect, the government of India has released around 1,500 crores in aid to Tamil Nadu and Andhra Pradesh. Around 493 crores to Andhra Pradesh, 450 crores to Tamil Nadu, and an additional 561 crores specifically for Chennai to deal with urban flooding. Because Chennai has repeatedly dealt with urban flooding incidents. There have been 3 such major urban flooding incidents in the last 8 years during every cyclone that has hit Chennai. So that is why, for the first time ever, a mitigation effort is being sponsored by the center. The central government is providing dedicated funds for urban flood mitigation in Chennai. This is the first time that the center is providing mitigation funds. I'll explain what are mitigation funds and response funds. What's the difference between them? First, please note down that under the Integrated Urban Flood Management Activities, a dedicated fund of 561 crores is being given to Chennai for flood mitigation efforts under the National Disaster Mitigation Fund. Is that clear? Apart from that, from the NDRF, from the National Disaster Response Funds, funds are being allocated to SDRF, to the SDRF account of Andhra Pradesh and Tamil Nadu. Separate funds are being allocated. Now, what is the difference between the two and why is this such a big development? See, as per the DM Act, 2 funds were supposed to be created at the national level. A National Disaster Response Fund and a National Disaster Mitigation Fund. Response Fund is always for financing the emergency relief operations. That is, when a disaster is about to happen or when a disaster has already happened, to conduct search and rescue operations, to provide basic aid to the affected people, to provide medical aid, to carry out search and rescue operations, to supply food, shelter, clothing, etc. Immediate funding will be needed at the state level because under the DM Act, states have a primary responsibility in emergency relief and response. So states need to have readily available funds to finance these relief efforts. They can't sit and wait for approvals to come from the legislature, from the parliament, to draw funds from consolidated fund, etc. So readily available funds have to be kept aside to finance these emergency operations. So that is why NDRF and SDRF have been created. At the state level, there is a SDRF. At the national level, there is a NDRF fund. Is that clear? So the State Disaster Response Fund is replenished by the NDRF. The center partially provides funds into the SDRF. It provides 75% of the funds to general category states, 90% funds to special category states, which are more vulnerable for disasters, especially the border states and the more affected vulnerable states like Uttarakhand, few northeastern states, etc. They get 90% funding from the center through NDRF. All right. General category states get around 75%, rest 25% has to be raised by the state government itself. Now this allocation as well, the distribution, is determined by the Finance Commission. The Finance Commission, which is set up once in every 5 years, that recommends the devolution of funds from center to states, also recommends the distribution of disaster financing funds as well. Distribution of funds from NDRF to SDRF is as per the recommendations of the Finance Commission. All right. Now, the funds which are being provided to the states, that has to be utilized by the state government first in case of emergency relief operations. When the fund is getting exhausted, that is when they can raise an additional appeal. They can ask for more funding from the center. The center will examine the case on an individual basis, that is on a case-to-case basis. Depending on the extent of damage caused by the disaster, center can approve the release of additional funds to replenish the SDRF. That is exactly what the center has done. It has released additional funding to Tamil Nadu and Andhra Pradesh to replenish their SDRF so that they can finance the emergency relief operations that are ongoing in Tamil Nadu and Andhra Pradesh. Now coming to your mitigation fund. The mitigation fund was not established in India. Even though the DM Act provided for it, mitigation fund was not created. The National Disaster Mitigation Fund is supposed to finance mitigation efforts. Mitigation efforts are implemented in the pre-disaster phase. When you plan and prepare for a disaster, that is where mitigation measures are financed to reduce the impact of the disaster. So the mitigation fund was not created due to the lack of financial requirements and due to the limited economic capabilities of the center. But now, for the first time, the government of India is providing a mitigation fund dedicated for Chennai. The 561 crore fund, which I was mentioning, is part of the National Mitigation Fund, which is being set up for the first time. It was not established before. So that is why this is a big development as far as financing disaster management in India is concerned. Next, on page 5, we have an article referring to the Hatti community from Himachal Pradesh. The Hatti community has been demanding scheduled tribe status from a very long time. They have staged protests and agitations, and it has become a big political issue in Himachal Pradesh. Recently, through a constitution order, the Amendment Act of 2023, ST status was provided to the Hatti community by the center. Is that clear? But it has not been implemented at the state level. So that is why members of Hatti community have protested again in Himachal Pradesh, asking for the quick implementation of the scheduled tribe status, which allows them to enjoy the benefits of reservation. So in this context, you should know more about the Hatti community or the Hattis. The Hattis are a very close-knit community found along the borders of Himachal Pradesh and Uttarakhand. Please note down this point. You can expect a prelims question. The community has traditionally sold various goods and products in local markets. The local markets known as hats. That is where these community members have sold the local produce. That is why the community itself is called the Hatti community, right? Because their primary occupation is to sell. They are traders at the local haats held at the town level. They sell vegetables, crops, local products, even meat and wool, etc. The community can be found in the river basin of Giri and Tons, which are tributaries of the Yamuna. And there are two distinct branches in this community. You have the Transgiri Hatti community and the Jonsar Bawar community. There are two different clans that exist within the Hatti community. So today they have been accorded with the ST status after a long fight. Now they are fighting for its implementation. There is a rigid caste system that exists within the community as well. Please make note of that. There are different upper, lower castes that exist within the Hatti community. Then you also have a local traditional system of governance called the Kumbli. It's similar to your Kaap system, just like few communities in northwestern India, they have the Kaap system, which is, by the way, illegal and unconstitutional. Similarly, there is a traditional council that looks after local community matters called the Kumbli system. The Kumbli community-based governance is also known for its rigid practices, just like the Kaap panchayats of Haryana and the nearby regions. They're known for their controversial decisions, their misogyny against women, their consistent stand, that goes against progressive norms. That is something which has brought lot of criticism against these community-based systems, such as the Kumbli and the Kaap system, which is prevalent in this belt of Haryana to Himachal Pradesh, right? So you find this within the Hatti community as well. Next, on page number 18, we have an article that refers to the problem of illegal migration that has been faced by Assam from East Pakistan and Bangladesh. I hope you know that Assam has received a huge influx of illegal migrants from East Pakistan, that is before 1971, before Bangladesh was created, and even after Bangladesh was created. So this issue has come up at the Supreme Court again because the large-scale entry of illegal migrants over the decades has created several problems in Assam. The native Assamese, who are the native indigenous community, have always opposed the illegal migrants, especially the Bengali illegal migrants. They could be both Bengali Hindus or Bengali Muslims, right? They have opposed all the Bengali illegal migrants irrespective of their religion because they see the outsiders as a threat. They see them as a threat to their identity, their culture, their land, their resources, etc. In the 70s especially, 70s and 80s, illegal migrants even got registered on the voters list. And it even allegedly led to manipulation of elections in Assam. This is what triggered the massive Assamese agitation of 1979 that turned violent, which even gave birth to insurgency in Assam. Insurgent groups like Ulfa were formed as separatist groups to break Assam away from India based on this demand. Their main concern was India was not effective in tackling illegal migration and illegal migrants were posing a threat to the Assamese. So this became the root cause for insurgency as well in Assam, which was born during the Assam agitation. Eventually, some stability was brought to Assam through the Assam Accord, signed in 1985. Few promises were made under the Assam Accord to tackle illegal migration that eventually brought the Assam agitation to an end. Now, a batch of petitioners representing indigenous Assamese, they've approached the Supreme Court pointing out that the government has not acted enough to tackle illegal migration and they've challenged the validity of Section 6A of the Citizenship Act. In this regard, the Supreme Court has sought more data from the center regarding illegal migration. Because see, Section 6A of the Citizenship Act of 1955 specifically deals with illegal migration that has happened from East Pakistan and Bangladesh into Assam. It divides the illegal migrants into three categories and allows some of the Bangladeshi illegal migrants to become Indian citizens under certain conditions. For example, those who arrived in Assam before 1966, they are deemed to be Indian citizens. Those who arrived between 1st January 1966 and 25th March 1971, That is the day on which Pakistani army launched Operation Searchlight in East Pakistan, where it crushed the Bengali rebellion. Between that period of 5 years, whoever came into Assam, they are also given Indian citizenship if they fulfill certain criteria, certain conditions. Only those who came after 25th March 1971 are deemed as illegal migrants under Section 6A of the Citizenship Act. Now, this is what has been challenged by the native Assamese. They are challenging that since Section 6A is legally allowing illegal migrants to become citizens, if they can prove that they were here in India before 1966, or they came in between 1966 and 1971, and if they can produce required documents, they are eligible for Indian citizenship. So, they have challenged the validity of this law, and the Supreme Court also agrees with the petitioners that not everyone can settle in India. If illegal migration goes unchecked, and if illegal migrants, some of them are being given citizenship, then it becomes a burden on the country. It could lead to socio-ethnic problems as seen in Assam. So the Supreme Court has raised the question as to why these provisions apply only for Assam. Why not for West Bengal? Why not for Tripura? Even they received illegal migrants from East Pakistan and Bangladesh. It applies specifically for Assam. That is the clarity that the Supreme Court has sought. It has asked the center to provide data as well regarding the inflow of illegal migrants into India from East Pakistan and Bangladesh. So please know what Section 6A of Citizenship Act deals with. It provides a way for Bengali illegal migrants from East Pakistan and Bangladesh to acquire Indian citizenship under certain conditions. Is that clear? Next, we are coming to the last two articles, very small updates. On page number 20, there is a small article that refers to a naval base in Cambodia. Cambodia is a Southeast Asian country located next to Myanmar. You can see the Gulf of Thailand and South China Sea over here, right? It's surrounded by countries like Vietnam, Myanmar, Laos and Thailand. That is where Cambodia is located. It has always been a very close ally of China. The PRC is very close to Cambodia. Cambodia also has a communist regime which is very close to China. So recently in Cambodia, a major naval base has been in news called the Ream Naval Base, which has been built with China's assistance. And it has been reported that Chinese naval ships have become the first foreign military vessels to dock at the new Cambodian naval base that faces the Gulf of Thailand and South China Sea, where China is already involved in several maritime disputes with Southeast Asian countries. So this is being seen as a military base of China in Cambodia. China has invested billions of dollars in developing and upgrading the Ream Naval Base of Cambodia. And now that the PLA naval ships are being docked, it has given rise to concern amongst all Southeast Asian countries, and even the US and European countries have expressed concern about the rising military presence and influence of China across the South China Sea. So please make a note of where the Ream Naval Base is located. Coming to the last article, we have an update from Pakistan. As you know, Pakistan has been going through a major economic crisis. Its economy is on the brink of collapse. It has only been supported by few friendly countries like China, Saudi Arabia and United Arab Emirates. They've all given a lot of economic assistance in the last 1.5 years to sustain the Pakistani economy. Now Pakistan is desperately seeking a bailout package from IMF as well. And in the meantime, it has managed to secure a financial package of $658 million from the ADB, from the Asian Development Bank. Is that clear? So this points towards the continuing economic crisis in Pakistan, right? It's on the verge of bankruptcy, similar to Sri Lanka, and it's only relying on foreign assistance coming from friendly countries and from international institutions like ADB and IMF. So you should know more about ADB as well. It's very important for prelims. The Asian Development Bank was established in 1966. It's headquartered at Manila in Philippines. It's a development bank providing development assistance to its member countries. Even though it says Asian Development Bank, its membership is not restricted only to Asian countries. There are non-Asian members as well in the ADB. Now I want you guys to take up a small homework, a small assignment. find out the members of ADB and the top 5 shareholders of ADB. Please find out these 2 points and mention this in the comments below. Let's see how many of you can get this right and how many of you can post this in the comments below. Find out the members, right? Go through the members at least, because there are a lot of members in this group. You don't have to mention all of them, but at least find out the top 5 shareholders. Which 5 countries have the highest shareholding at the ADB? Is that clear? India is also a big recipient of funding from ADB. That is why it becomes relevant. All right. So this concludes my discussion for today. Please take up these 2 questions for your mains answer writing practice. Write your answers. It's all based on what we have discussed, and post your answers in the answer writing portal, for which the link is provided in the description box below. Don't forget to head to our Telegram channel now. We'll have a quiz in a short while on these topics that will help you revise these articles again. So the link for the Telegram channel also is in the description box below. I hope you guys liked the session today. Do let me know how it went in the comments. Do press the like button and don't forget to subscribe to our channel. That is it for today. I'll see you tomorrow. Thanks for watching. Have a good day.